everybody, Dennis Speigel here. Most of you may be aware that the Disney Paris Resort is celebrating its 30th anniversary in 2022. For those of us that have been in the industry for many years, it's hard to believe that this park welcomed its first guests 30 years ago. From the get-go, we watched this park experience financial woes, cultural clashes, marketing failures, and many other challenges that almost made it seem like the park would never be successful. And yet, here we are 30 years later, and look at it now. So let's spend a few minutes talking about what this park overcame, and in the process, recall some takeaways that might be of benefit to us today. Given the huge popularity and the success of the Disney complex in Florida and California, it was inevitable that Disney would eventually expand internationally. The park in Paris opened in 1992 at a development cost of 4.4 billion US dollars. This was significantly higher than the projected cost of $1 billion. Given its choice of location and because Disney only owned 49% of the operation, the park opened under the name Euro Disney. On opening day, 25,000 people attended, far below the anticipated forecast. By November of 1992, that same year, the shortfall of revenues and the net loss were larger than the analysts had ever expected or anticipated. Disney immediately went on the defense, promising to cut costs, improve marketing, and reduce prices. By 1994, the park had over $3 billion of debt and on the verge of closure. They made deals with investors and banks to defer payments. They also went through a radical rebranding to save the park. At that time, 88 different banks were invested and were meeting to make decisions about the park's fate. If one bank had decided to withdraw or pull out of the financial program, the park would have been pressed into bankruptcy. During the vote, all 88 banks agreed to continue to support the project both short and long term, realizing that their investments would be in jeopardy. Still, though, the park eventually, it stabilized, made improvements, and dropped any reference to Euro from its name. It continued to be plagued by issues. So what happened? That's exactly what Bank Paribas, the lead bank of the 88, wanted to know. They hired ITPS, my company, to work with them on the forensic audit of the problematic issues associated with the park. ITPS helped identify these issues and worked with them on the negotiation strategy needed to put in place for a new management agreement with Disney. So what did we learn about the troubles of the Disney park in Paris? Well, first, the Parisian market was displeased with the building of Disney in Paris. For many years, the Parisians would never visit Disney or acknowledge it. They felt it was beneath them. Disney's ongoing clashes with their host country have been infamous. So a very important factor that Disney mishandled was the cultural differences present in Europe and in France. Disney went out of its way to accommodate European culture. The issue is there really is no such thing as European culture. There's Italian, Spanish, British, Irish, and on, hundreds of cultures, in fact. Disney was predominantly an American company trying to tailor its theme park for a collection of cultures that didn't really understand. They didn't understand. As for France, well, Disney is popular there, but France is fiercely protected of their own culture and of culture imports from other nations. Some of these cultures differences were seen in the operation, such as Disney simply limiting breakfast items. The biggest issue, however, was not serving alcohol. Alcohol to the French is like water to the Americans. They would not stand for alcohol not being served. Second, based on the US and Japan theme park performances, Disney overestimated the spending habits of the Europeans by a significant margin. Europeans spent less than Americans and Japanese when they're on vacation. At the time of opening Disney Park in Paris, Europeans could actually vacation cheaper in the United States. It was cheaper at that time to fly from Europe to the US than it was for flying around Europe to Paris. Once in Florida, Europeans were guaranteed better weather, a larger menu of attractions from which to attend, like Disney World, Epcot, SeaWorld, Universal Studios, iDrive, and all the other properties in the area. Thirdly, Disney misread the hotel accommodations market and opened with too many hotels. Rather than building on demand, they overbuilt. At the time of opening, 6 hotels had been built, totaling 5,200 rooms. These hotels were expensive as well, and well above the price point that Europeans were typically used to pay. And fourth, a huge problem that existed for years was protests. There were a lot of non-Disney industry protests laid at their doorstep. The Disney property was chosen for the protests because the protesters knew they would receive high-profile media coverage. France is known for having a lot of strikes occur, and Disney became the place for strike promotions during the first 3 to 4 years of its operation. And last but not least, let's talk about the location, because this, in my opinion, was the single most relevant negative impact on the park. Building a park in Europe was a reasonable choice. It was going to happen. The only issue was where to build. Italy was considered, since Mickey Mouse was very popular there, but it really didn't have the land mass needed. Other countries had areas, but bad weather, harsh terrains, or they just didn't offer a large enough tourist-based market. In the end, Disney was down to choosing between Spain and its temperate weather or France with its wide expanse of countryside. Disney went with France. Think it would be a more accessible to the majority of the tourists coming to France. Unfortunately, the location selection in Marne-la-Vallée was on the wrong side of the weather line for the Paris market, much rainier and much colder. In the years following the park's opening, it became clear that France may have not been the wisest choice. I personally believe that Spain would have been a better location. It would have been better received and provided better year-round weather. Costa del Sol would have been the location to choose. In the end, though, when we examine the Disney operation in Paris, we're reminded of very important industry strategies that cannot be overlooked. And Disney overlooked these. Number one, be diligent in choosing the right location. They were on the wrong side of the weather line. Do not overlook the cultures and customs of your surroundings. You can't just force American plastic on people. Build on the demand and do not overbuild like they did with the hotels. And price the entry at the right level. Meet the expectations of your guests and the market. So, with all that said, let's fast forward 30 years. Disney Paris is successful. It's the most visited park in Europe with over 15 million visitors annually. And that says a lot about perseverance. The park went through a huge learning curve to get to where they are today, costing money, anguish, and a Herculean turnaround. So I hope you enjoyed this bit of history and background on Disney Paris. I guess what we do now is join me in saying happy 30th to Disneyland Paris. You deserve it.